And joining me on the Pundits to Talk Education is Mark Browning, Vice President of College Relations for College of Western Idaho, and Kevin Richert of Idaho Education News. Kevin, let's start with the K through 12 public schools budget that was presented to the Joint Finance Committee this week. What were the highlights from the budget presentation?
Well, I think what you're hearing in this budget request are they're playing the hits, both Governor Little and State Superintendent Sherry Ibarra. They're talking about programs that the legislature has approved and endorsed overwhelmingly over the past few years, whether you're talking about teacher pay raises through the career ladder, additional funding for advanced opportunities, advanced money in literacy in the form of this summer reading program. So not really any surprises, not really a whole lot of differences really between Governor Little's budget and State Superintendent Sherry Ibarra's budget. And I think because of the familiarity of these programs and because you're sitting on this unprecedented surplus, I'm having a hard time seeing that there's going to be much turbulence surrounding the K-12 budget. I think it probably sails through fairly easily. Not so much with higher education, but definitely on K-12. I think it's pretty smooth sailing.
Yes, let's talk a little bit about that contention surrounding the higher education budget presentations, particularly during Boise State University's presentation on Friday morning. What was going on in JFAC?
I think even over Zoom, you could feel the tension because Marlene Tromp was hit with several questions about social justice issues. Ron Nate, the Republican from Rexburg, Priscilla Giddings, Republican from Whiteburg. These are two new members of JFAC, by the way, and they're two hardline conservatives asking really pointed questions about social justice issues. Most of Representative Nate's talking points come pretty much straight out of a white paper that the Idaho Freedom Foundation co-authored in December. But you could tell President Trump was not happy with the questions at all, and was saying, look, our agenda is to serve students and the state. And she accused Nate of misrepresenting a lot of facts about programs at Boise State.
Really Representatives Nate and Giddings are new to the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, but they're not new to the legislature. And the concerns they brought up weren't the first time that we've heard these issues from very conservative lawmakers.
There's been a lot of friction between House conservatives and Marlene Tromp since she arrived in July of 2019. You saw that last year when the House voted down two versions of the higher ed budget. It took a third version to get through the House. Once it finally got to the Senate, it passed unanimously. And I suspect that tension is still there. I think there are a lot of conservatives in the House. I think the House may be more conservative this year than it was last year because of the elections. I think it's gonna be tough to get a higher ed budget through the House, but I think there's still a lot of sympathy towards the plight of higher education when you get over to the Senate.
So these appropriation bills in higher ed, there are several, but the main two, what they call the college and university budget, is the four-year schools. So it's Boise State, University of Idaho, Idaho State, and Lewis Clark State. They're packaged in one. The community colleges are packaged in their own. And then there are a number of smaller appropriations for the special programs, the medical programs, WWAMI, those kinds of things. The overriding tension within higher ed and within the legislature, within JFAC in that room is that, and I believe Representative Nate came out and said this, are you willing to put your peers, your colleagues in harm's way, meaning the University of Idaho, Idaho State, and Lewis Clark, with their appropriation if you don't consent to have Boise State's appropriation pulled out separately? That would be unprecedented. I think in most of all of our time following the legislature, we've not seen that. The difficulty is from a business standpoint, you look at, we hear constantly, let's run these institutions like businesses. And President Satterley over at Idaho State, I think, was very direct in his comments about, is it $74 million worth of cuts and how many, positions that he's cut. He's cut his business operations to the point where they're just, they're providing just the bare minimum. And if you look at what the purpose of higher education is in the state, which is to educate your citizenry and to position people who come to learn for better futures through education, through career training, through the degree attainment, whatever it might be, you're hurting your businesses. And I think that was the message that probably got drowned out a little bit in what we heard Friday morning in JFAC, was that many of the advocate positions that have come for more inclusion and those types are coming from major Idaho industries. These universities are responding to the major industries whom they're supplying with a workforce. They're trying to take care of their customer, if you will. And I think that message got a little lost.
But I think a
But that's
big
an
number,
interesting point, Mark. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kevin. But
I think a big number that JFAC heard this week was 493. That's the number of positions that the four-year institutions say that they've had to cut since the COVID crisis. You know, and you had Kevin Satterlee say some of these cuts are not sustainable. You had Cynthia Pemberton, the president of Lewis Clark State College, who is probably the most optimistic college president I've ever met, saying we're in the people business and we're going to have to reinvest in people. And she has ruled out the idea of another tuition freeze at Lewis Clark. So that message, I think, had to resonate with some of the budget writers.
I would think so too. And if you look at that committee, there's a substantial amount of new membership in the committee, new members to the legislature on that committee. So there's a lot of background there that they've got to get up to speed on. But I think from a business sense, the message that is being put forth is, hey, we've cut and cut and cut. You've got to put some minimal investment back in people at this point. And I think there's a bigger conversation to be had with the state in general. You know, we've tried to cut our way to prosperity in many ways, but you have to look at it from an economic standpoint. Just how deep can you go to the point where you're not providing the services that people are paying for?
You know, Mark, I want to bring the community colleges into the conversation. College of Western Idaho, for the most part, has avoided a lot of the hurt that a lot of the higher ed institutes, not just in Idaho, but around the nation, are really feeling right now.
You know, we took our licks early, actually pre-COVID. So the way community colleges really work is when your economy is really strong and hot, when you have an unemployment rate that's statistically nil, you know, less than 3%, we typically, our enrollments are way down. So we looked at this over 2.5 years ago and looked at some of the forecasting and said, this economy is not going anywhere but up. We need to start cutting now because we're going to anticipate an enrollment decline. So for fiscal 20, we budgeted a 10% decrease in enrollment. We did the same in 21. We're going to do the same for 22. And what we did was operationally, then we took those cuts voluntarily and then matched along with the governor's 2% and the 5%. So, you know, our folks they've taken some hurt. We haven't laid off, we haven't furloughed, but we've gotten very, very lean in our operation. That, along with the benefit of a super hot economy and the rise in views in the entire district, and the valuation that comes in, that's helped us to be able to sustain that. We haven't had to pass on any cost to our students now in 5 going on 6 years. We've held tuition the same. Not everybody in the state has that advantage, and we're very lucky for it. You know, the other thing too, Melissa, is all the things that we've kind of lamented at CWI for years, like, oh gosh, we wish we could do something with residence housing. We wish we could have athletics, right? They're very expensive to have. We wish we had food service other than vending machines on campus because so many of our students are hungry. Those are all things that take tremendous amount of capital and cash to keep going on an ongoing basis. And when COVID hit and your students aren't on campus, those are the first things to really go down the tank. And we simply didn't have to deal with that. We were able to take our collective effort. And I got to just take a quick opportunity. Our faculty were tremendous. They were the ones that stepped in and said, hey, we could do this, let's try this. They came up with something called the high flex model, where essentially the student chooses how they want to take their class on an ongoing basis. Monday, I'm in person if it's offered that way. Wednesday, I'm going to take it via Zoom. Friday, I'm going to take an online assignment. And the faculty came up with and said, yeah, that will keep our students engaged and we can keep that going. So that's been the case for us. We've been very, very fortunate.
Kevin, we've got about 90 seconds left. When we're talking about K-12, when we're talking about higher education, how much of the conversation this week has focused beyond this COVID crisis that we're facing right now? How much are we looking to this post-COVID world?
Well, I think this was a very reflective education week. Between what Superintendent Ibarra said about the K-12 budget and what the college and university presidents have said, I think there was a lot of kind of recapping what the past 10 months have been like with instructors, teachers, and college professors having to rethink how they deliver education on a dime, and institutions having to rethink how they spend money and how money comes in also on a dime. I think there was a lot of reflection of just how far things have had to go and how much has had to change in 10 months. And I think legislators were receptive to that. I think at one point, Stephen Payne, the chairman of the Senate Education Committee, all but told the university presidents and the college presidents it was almost miraculous that we're able to keep the doors open this fall. So I think there was a lot of goodwill on that front, but I think there's also a very sobering message about sustainability of budgets, not just this year, but moving forward.
All right, Kevin Richert, Idaho Education News, Mark Browning, College of Western Idaho, thanks so much for joining us. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next week.